Hi, welcome back to my channel, Creative Crochet with Rhonda, and we are going to do part 2 of the beach cover-up or swimsuit cover-up tutorial, and I'm going to show you how to do the second part of the panel, which includes the Rosette Pattern, which is found in this book, Indispensable Stitch Collection for Crocheters by Melissa Leitman. I highly recommend this book. I will leave the link to it below if you'd like to purchase it. And also, if you're enjoying this tutorial, please subscribe if you haven't already. Press the like button and also press that notification bell next to the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my videos. It really helps me out as well. So I hope you're enjoying this tutorial. Let's get on with it. Okay, so on to the next part of the project. You'll notice I have a black background. I think it's easier to see because this color is light. And it's really important to be able to see what I'm showing you here. So that's why I chose the black background. I hope that helps. But what I've done is after the initial starting chain, I chained up, as I showed you, 12 extra rows for a total of 13. You'll notice I have stitch markers in here, and I'm going to explain all that in a moment. I would like to take a look at the original panel to show you what is going on here. I'll explain it all to you. Okay, so I've spread this mesh out as wide as I can so you can see what's going on here. There are 13 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, where I start to join this next part of the pattern. And you'll notice they're dispersed clusters of 4 fans. That's what's basically going on here. There's a fan here, a fan here, a fan here, and a fan here. So we start off the first row with these dispersed fans, and if we count the number of single crochets in between, you'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So in every 5th single crochet we do that fan, and it starts from the center. When you go up to the second row, you're having fans next to the starting fan from the row below. And you'll also notice they're dispersed. I've got 3 rows of fans, and the top and the bottom are the same, and the middle one is in between. I hope you can see this. So we're starting off with the single fan, the double fans, single, and then going up to the next row, we are dispersing them. So now they're in between. So what you have here in this completed pattern are the 3 separate sections of these clusters and a total of 9 rows, because you've got the row of singles, doubles, and single, and then single, double, single, single, double, single. So a total of 9 rows complete in this pattern of clusters. And it looks like 3 separate sections where 2 are the same. And then there's the center one, which is dispersed between the one below and above. So hopefully that makes sense. I think it gives a pretty variation to this pattern. And as you can see, it's not exactly in the center of the panel, which is fine because this will be closer to the center of the front of your body. And we go back into the regular mesh pattern. So now I'm going to explain why the stitch markers. You may have chosen a different length than me. I ended up with a count of 57 single crochets across. What you need to do is you need to count your single crochets. So you'll see here where you attached with the single crochets, you need to count those single crochets, and you need to put a stitch marker into the center, so into the middle one. Now, if you have an even number, don't worry about that, because one side of the panel is going to be your front, one is going to be the back. So if the clusters start at different places, it doesn't really matter. Just get the closest to the center that you can, and you are going to put a stitch marker into that middle single crochet, and then I will show you what to do next. The first place I put my stitch marker is in that loop where I left off, so my work doesn't unravel as I do this next part. Okay, so I think I told you that I had 57 single crochets in my project. So what I did is I put my center stitch marker into the 29th single crochet from the beginning where I last left off. So I counted in all of my single crochets, found the center at 29, and then what I did is I worked my way back to where I left off my work here, and I counted and put a stitch marker in every 5th single crochet. So here is the center, and then I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th put a stitch marker. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th a stitch marker, and all the way down to the end until the furthest place I can go. But remember, the next row up, we're going to have another fan in 1 stitch over, so you have to make sure that you have enough space for that. You don't need to put these clusters all the way to the end, just as far as you can go. So my last one is here, and then I have 1, 2, 3 single crochets left, and I will have in the next row up, I will have 1 extra cluster here. I'll have this space left over. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Take your stitch markers, start with your center stitch, and then count in every 5th row, put a stitch marker towards where you last left off. Now you could technically go towards the other end and put in a stitch marker in every 5th single crochet. I didn't do that because once I do the pattern, it's just going to follow along. So I'm not going to need the stitch markers because it's just going to be the same as what I've been doing in the first half, and it will all fall into place and everything will match up with the other side. So let's move forward. Now that you've got your stitch markers in, I'm going to show you what you need to do to achieve that pattern of the clusters. Okay, so now for this next part, the first thing you need to do is to take your stitch marker out so you're ready to start. And I promise you, this part is going to be fun and easy. I think you're going to love it. It just goes so smoothly. Okay, so we're going to start off the same way we did the first part, which was the straight mesh, by chaining 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so starting off the same way, and where you see this first part of your mesh, before the stitch marker, you're going to be doing the exact same thing as you were doing before. Go into that first chain 5 space and do a single crochet and chain up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And into the next chain 5 space, do the same thing. Single crochet in that chain 5 space and chain up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And your stitch marker may be in a different place than mine. So you're going to go and do the same thing up until the chain just before you see that stitch marker. So I've chained 5. I'm going to do 1 more single crochet. And where the stitch marker is, I am not going to chain 5. I'm going to go straight into that single crochet, and I am going to make 5 double crochets. So essentially I'm making a fan in that single crochet. So you can go ahead and take out your stitch marker. Now you are going to make 5 double crochets into that single crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's your first double crochet into that stitch. You're going to do 4 more double crochets to make that very first fan. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, pull through 2, 2 double crochets, and do that 3 more times. Okay, so you've got your first fan, and now again, we're not going to chain 5. We're going to do a single crochet in that next chain 5 space. So to the left and to the right of a fan, we do not chain 5. We just go straight into the chain 5 space and do a single crochet. And now to move over to the next stitch marker, we're going to do the same thing as we did in the first part of the project. Chain 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, single crochet into the next chain 5 space, chain 5, single crochet into the next chain 5 space, and do that until you reach the chain 5 space just to the right of your stitch marker. Okay, so here we are again, and you're going to do exactly the same thing when you are in your last single crochet next to the stitch marker. You're going to take the stitch marker out. And remember, you're not going to chain 5 this time. You're going to go directly into this single crochet and do 5 double crochets to make another fan. So just the way you did before. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for your second fan. Okay, so again, remember, in the next chain 5 space, you're going to do a single crochet without chaining 5 because you're next to your fan. And you're going to do the same thing all the way across. Chain 5, single crochet, chain 5, single crochet, chain 5, single crochet, and next to your shells, you are not going to chain 5. You're just going to do your single crochet without chaining 5, either to your left or right of the fan that you're creating in the single crochet. So keep doing that same thing until you get to the stitch marker you have in the center of your panel, and I'll tell you what you need to do next. Okay, so I'm approaching my center stitch marker, and you may have chosen to continue along for the rest of your panel with your stitch markers, or you may have left it like me. If you've put in your stitch markers, then you don't have to count. If you didn't, you have to count, but it's easy. So you'll see I'm at my final one here, and I take out my last stitch marker, and remember, no chaining next to your fan. So go ahead and make that fan with your 5 double crochets. And then your single crochet into the next chain 5 space. Okay, so this is where you have to start counting if you don't have stitch markers, but it's easy because all you're doing is you're chaining 5 and doing a single crochet into the chain 5 space a total of 4 times. Okay, so I'm going to do that with you. Chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, single crochet into the chain 5 space, and again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and single crochet. That's twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, single crochet for 3 times, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and single crochet for 4 times. Once you've done that, then you know this is the stitch where you're going to put in your fan. So no chain 5 and do a fan of 5 double crochets into that stitch. Okay, so I'm just doing the same thing all along. Again, no chain 5, just a single crochet in the next chain 5 space. And again, I'm counting 4 times with the chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Single crochet into the chain 5 space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Single crochet into the next chain 5 space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Single crochet into the next chain 5 space. And once more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Single crochet into the next chain 5 space. Okay, so again, if you went ahead and put stitch markers in, you don't have to be counting, but you'll notice from in between fans, you should have 4 chain 5 spaces, and then you're creating your next fan. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then a single crochet into the next chain 5 space. And again, you're going to start your count of 4 chain 5s and then your fan, and continue to do that until you get to the end. And remember to leave some over. You don't go all the way to the end. Make sure you have space for that final shell of your next row up to the left. Okay, so I will meet you at the end. I will show you what I've come up with, and we'll go on to the next part. Okay, so I've reached what is my final shell. I have 4 chain 5 spaces left, and so into the first one, because my shell is right there, I'm just going to do a single crochet, and then I'm going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a single crochet in the next chain 5 space, just like we've done before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, single crochet in the next chain 5 space, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a single crochet in my next chain 5 space. Now this is the end where I did not do the chain 2 and the double crochet. I just did the chain 5 and the single crochet. So at this point I'm going to chain a total of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. From now on, this is the right side of my pattern. Wherever I started that first shell, that is the right side. And so you need to indicate in some way, and I like to do that with a stitch marker, that this is the right side of my pattern, and I have to remember where my right side is starting. So I'm going to put it right here, and I know that my right side is on the left. Wherever this stitch marker is, I have to make sure it's on the left, and I know that this is the right side. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. So now we're going to turn our work, and we're going to do the same thing, except being on row 2. Remember, we're going to have 2 fans next to this first fan. So in these single crochet spaces to the left and the right of our fan in the row below, we're going to create another fan on each side of it. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You've chained 6, do your single crochet in the next chain 5 space, chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and now again with a single crochet in the next chain 5 space. And again, it depends where you have your fan, but you're going to stop to just to the right of where that fan is. So I have one more chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to do a single crochet. And now I'm just to the right of that fan, and into this single crochet right next to my fan, I'm going to create another fan. So again, it's going to be 5 double crochets into that spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so before we went into the chain 5 space and we did a single crochet, we have a total of 5 double crochets here. We're going to skip the first 2, and into the third double crochet we're going to do a single crochet. So instead of making our single crochet into the chain 5 space, we're making it into the center of that shell down below, and then we're going to go into the next single crochet space, and we're going to do another shell. So 1 double crochet, 2, 3, 4, and 5 into that same single crochet space. So now you'll see we have the 2 shells next to the shell below, and into the next space, just like we did in the row below. We're not going to do a chain 5 next to the shell. We're going to do a single crochet and do the same thing across to the next shell. Another chain 5 and single crochet into the next chain 5 space again. So basically we're doing the same thing we were doing all along, and instead we're making 2 shells, one on either side of the shell below. So again, shell into that single crochet space right next to the shell below. And remember, a single crochet into the center of that shell, and then another shell in the single crochet right next to that shell below. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so do the same thing all the way across, and now the nice thing is you don't have to count anything because the shell below is your guide. You just know that you need to put a shell into the single crochets to the left and right of the shell below, and do the same as you've been doing all along with the single crochet into the chain 5 spaces to the left and right, and then do your chain 5 and single crochet. And I will meet you at the end. It's basically just a repeat of what you've been doing. So go and have fun with it, and I'll see you at the end of the row. One thing I didn't mention is that my count of my first row, I had 11 shells across. So I know that I'm going to have a total in this first section of 11 clusters. Okay, so you can count yours, and that's important just because you want to make sure you have the same number of clusters on both of your panels, so you have an even number of clusters on the left and right side of your front and the left and the right side of your back. So that's really important. Make sure you do your count exactly the same for both the left and the right panels. Okay, so reaching the end of this panel, you'll notice I have my last shell, and then I've got a couple of chain 5s here as well. And this is the end where at the very end of the row I chain 2, find my 4th chain, and then do a double crochet to finish off this row. Like so. And then I chain 6 as I normally would. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And again, I'm turning my work to move on to the final part of this first section of clusters. You'll notice now in each section, I've got the bottom cluster, the 2 in the middle, and now I'm going to be working on this final cluster here. You'll also notice that in between the clusters, in this second portion, you have 3 chain 5 spaces in between. So to start, remember at this end, we're going into the first chain 5 space. We're not going into the chain 2 space. We're going into this chain 5 space with a single crochet. So just like we did before, and another chain 5. And just like we did before. Okay, now we're getting to the cluster, and we want our next shell to be here. Okay, so even though there's a shell here, we're still going to chain 5 because we don't want to make our next shell until this point here in between. So we chain 5 and do our single crochet in the middle of this shell. So we're skipping 2 double crochets, putting a single crochet into the next one. And now we're going to make a shell into the single crochet in between the 2 shells below. So find that single crochet and do 5 double crochets into that stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And skip 2 double crochets, do your single crochet in the middle of the shell below, and do a single crochet into the next chain 5 space. You're not going to do a chain 5 at that point. And there you have the first cluster of 4 shells. And now you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and do a single crochet in the next chain 5 space. So what you're seeing here is that when you were at the top of this shell, you didn't chain 5, and when you went from the shell you just created to the top of the shell below, again you didn't chain 5. But now going from the top of this shell, you are going to chain 5 and carry on as you were doing before. Chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and a single crochet into the next chain 5 space, and keep going like that to finish the 4 shell clusters along this row. So I'll repeat that one more time. Chain 5, single crochet, chain 5, and single crochet into the middle stitch of this next shell. And now put your fan into the single crochet in between. One, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And my apologies if I'm calling them clusters when I'm referring to the fans, because of course it's the 4 fans that are creating the cluster. So each cluster has a total of 4 fans in it. So once you've created that top fan, now you're going to skip the 2 double crochets in the fan below and do a single crochet in the middle of that fan, and now you're going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you should only have 2 points where you're not chaining 5. And each of those points are directly to the left and right of the fan you're creating. So even though you are creating this single crochet at the top of a fan, you are still going to chain 5 at this point because you're leaving the cluster and going into the regular mesh stitches, if that makes sense. And you're going to do the same thing all the way across with your chain 5s. And single crochet until you reach your clusters. Chain 5 here, single crochet, and remember you're not going to create a shell here, so you need to chain 5 again. And do your single crochet in the middle of the top of that shell. The only time you are not chaining 5 is just before you make a new shell. And then of course that shell is your 5 double crochets in that single crochet stitch. So you are not chaining 5 just before you make your shell and just after you make your shell. Other than that, you are chaining 5. So now after you've made this single crochet, you are going to chain 5 because you're not going into another shell, you're going into your single crochet in this chain. So carry along as I've done with this. If you need to backtrack, go ahead and do that, just to make sure you are doing it correctly. And I will meet you at the end because next we're going to start the next section of clusters of 4 shells in between the ones we've just made. Okay, so now I've come to the end of my row. I've completed my first set of clusters of the 4 shells, and at the end I just chain 5 and single crochet to the end. At the end of this row I just single crocheted in the last chain 5 space, and I'm ready to go to the next set of clusters. So I'm going to pull out my original panel again and show you what comes next. Okay, so here is my original panel. You'll notice that the last set I made here, when I went to the second set, I actually went in. So what we have to consider here is that in between the 2 widest part of our clusters, so where the 2 shells were side by side, we have 3 chain 5 spaces, and into the middle of these spaces in that single crochet is where you need to place your first shell in the next section. So really there isn't any more counting. Your setup row at the very beginning where you put your stitch markers, that was the only time you had to do any counting. Now you're just looking at the spacing, and we want each of these clusters to be in between the ones below, and so we look at the shortest distance. It's 3 chains. So again, the first shell goes into the middle single crochet of those 3 spaces. So let's take a look at our panel and see what we're going to do to achieve that. Okay, so here we are, and it may seem more complicated than it is. Once you start working it, it's really not hard. If you're looking here at these clusters, just take a look at where these 3 openings are, and in the center is where you do your first shell. So you might want to take a stitch marker and just mark that off for yourself. And if you think that it might make it easier to do that in the center of each going forward, then go ahead and do that. But basically, you'll see where the widest part of your cluster is. There are 3 single crochets, and in the center one is where you're going to do your first shell. So I'm just going to do it here, but go ahead and put those stitch markers in if you think it will make it easier for yourself. I'll also point out that my stitch marker is here, which means I am now working on the wrong side of my piece. Okay, because remember, the stitch marker is to the left when we're looking at the right side of the piece. Okay, so as we did before, you're going to chain 6 at the very beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And single crochet into that first chain 5 space. And just as you did before, you're going to chain 5 and single crochet alternatively until you get to the chain 5 space right next to your shell below. So moving along, you're going past this cluster, because remember, your stitch marker is here, and this is where you want to start your next shell. So you're going to keep chaining 5. Don't get confused by that cluster below. You're just going to go into that middle of that shell, just like you did on the ones below. Put in your single crochet as though it is your chain 5 space, and continue from there. So I'm chaining 5, single crochet, chain 5, single crochet, and here we are, the stitch marker where I want my shell. So remember, anywhere to the left or right of that shell, you don't chain 5. So now I can take out my stitch marker and create my shell. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochet, and 3, 4, and 5. And again, remember, anywhere to the left or right of the shell, no chain 5. So in you go with that single crochet into that next chain 5 space. And you'll notice in between each of these, you have 2 chain 5 spaces. So now all you're doing is continuing along until you reach the center single crochet. Okay, and you can see it really clearly when you look here, especially because I have the different colors. But if you feel more comfortable marking them off, by all means go ahead and do that. And just continue along just as you have, making sure that you know you're putting each of your shells in this row in between. So even if you look at these shells, you can see there's 4 chains, and in between you're putting your next shell. So it's pretty easy to see actually. And anytime you're on top of that shell, you just treat it as though it's another chain 5 space. So once I move away from this shell, I'm chaining twice, and now I'm in the center and I create my next shell. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, we're going to make 1 single crochet in the next chain 5 space and continue along until you get to that middle single crochet in between the clusters below. Okay, so here I am again in the middle, and I'm creating my shell. So this is definitely one of those projects where stitch markers can come in handy for sure. You may not need to mark it off. Visually you may be able to easily see in between the 2 chains here to put in your shell, but it makes it easier for me to visually show you as I'm showing you how to create this. And we know that the only place you don't do a chain 5 after a single crochet is directly before and after a shell. Other than that, we're chaining 5. So here we are again. I know when I hit that stitch marker, I don't chain 5 and I make my shell into that space, and I can remove my stitch marker. Okay, so do the same all along to create that first shell in your cluster for the next section. And I will meet you at the end. It may seem pretty straightforward enough as it is, and I will put the links below to key moments, so you can look below in the description box and it will show you exactly when each key moment of this tutorial is starting to help you to move along. If you need more help, you can keep watching. If you don't need more help, this will allow you to jump forward to the next part. So just in case you need to see more of what we're doing to get this second set of clusters, I am going to keep going along and showing you where we need to put those shells. But in the meantime, I am going to complete this row and I will meet you when we get to the end. Okay, so completing the first part of this second set of clusters, I actually have a lot of chain 5s. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 completing this row. Now technically I could have put half a cluster over here, and you could, but I decided not to. I decided that I was very happy with these other 2 sections, that are this one and the next one I'm going to be doing, having the clusters that are furthest down. This is going to be the bottom of my piece, and I really didn't care to have clusters way at the bottom, so I was okay with that. And at this point here, this is where I'm doing my chain 2 and doing that double crochet in the 4th chain. Chain 6 and turn my work. Now I'm going to leave you to the next part, because the next part is exactly the same as the second section when we did the first clusters, where you do the shells in both single crochets next to the shells below. So if you can't remember, just go back, and again I'm going to leave key moments below, so I'm going to try to leave it so that you could find the different sections of where I did my work, so you can backtrack much more easily than having to search for it. I think that will be helpful. Okay, so continue with that. Continue with the 2 fans and the 1 fan on top to complete this section, and really the next section is just going to go back to identical to what this was. So if you look down below, you're going to see that it's exactly the same with spacing and everything as this one. Okay, so with the instruction I've given you, you should be able to complete the remainder of your clusters, And then from there, you just go forward with more of your plain mesh. And you may have decided just to do the mesh, and that's okay too. Either way, it works. This should give you enough direction whether you've decided to do just the mesh or whether you've decided to do the whole thing in this cluster section to complete your panel. And you want to make 2 identical panels. And then I'm going to get back to you and show you how to start assembling this piece, putting your panels together to make your either a cardigan type of cover-up, or you can join it on both sides and make a cover-up that is more like a dress that is completely joined on both the back and the front. So enjoy finishing that, and I will meet you back once you have 2 panels.